Comic book movies have changed an awful lot in the past few decades, and that goes for their box office returns as well. Here's why superheroes don't print money like they used to, and what the future might hold for the genre. If you were lucky enough to witness the birth of the MCU in real time during Phase 1, then you know just how revolutionary it felt when Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk, Thor, and Captain America led into 2012's The Avengers. Fans were thrilled to see their favorite comic book heroes interact, and the bosses at Marvel Studios were more than satisfied with their profits. They turned a $220 million budget into more than $1.5 billion at the box office, kicking off a staggeringly profitable series of films. It's hard to overstate how successful Phases 2 and 3 of the MCU were. Out of the 17 movies that Marvel Studios released during that era, 8 of them made more than $1 billion worldwide, 12 if you adjust for inflation. This culminated with the record-breaking releases of Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, both of which broke $2 billion by the time they left theaters. The Infinity Saga ended with a bang, but the MCU never seemed to fully recover. 13 movies came out of the MCU in Phases 4 and 5, and the only 2 of them that joined the 3 comma club were the multiversal crossovers, Spider-Man: No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine.
Welcome to the MCU, by the way. You're joining at a bit of a low point.
Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness gets there if you adjust for inflation, but it fell short of the billion-dollar milestone during its initial theatrical run. You don't need to be a mathematician to understand how dramatic of a drop-off that is. This trend wasn't limited to the MCU either, as DC struggled to recreate the box office success of Wonder Woman and Aquaman after their respective releases in 2017 and 2018. Things got so dire that they scrapped their extended universe and started from scratch, especially since the billion-dollar success of Joker in 2019 proved that audiences were looking for something different from new comic book films. As the MCU grew and evolved from 2012 to 2019, the franchise gained different types of fans. While some have been seated for every installment since the opening weekend of Iron Man, the series has also gained a much more casual following over time. Suddenly, people who'd never touched a comic book before were familiar with characters like Ant-Man and Rocket Raccoon.
There's a new Marvel out that's supposed to be nuts. We should go see that.
Everyone and their mother came out for Infinity War and Endgame, but the only billion-dollar MCU event movies since then have been nostalgia plays. No Way Home brought back former Spider-Man Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, while Deadpool and Wolverine resurrected Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and some of his compatriots from Marvel movies past. The MCU makes money when it reminds people of movies that they didn't make, but if a film isn't Cameo City, a lot of people are probably going to sit it out. Just look at Marvel's newest release, Fantastic Four: First Steps. Its opening weekend gross of $118 million domestic was undeniably impressive, the best since Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and the highest of any non-sequel in the post-Endgame era. It's had the best Thursday previews of any 2025 release so far, and ticket sales for the film's opening day on Friday were higher than expected. That all sounds great, but there's a catch. The following Saturday and Sunday both had massive drops in ticket sales, giving First Steps one of the worst internal multipliers in the MCU. What does that mean? It means that while MCU diehards are still showing up as early as possible to avoid getting spoiled, the casual fanbase that the franchise once enjoyed has largely faded away. America isn't the only place where casual fans are dropping the MCU. While Marvel once leaned on the international market to reliably cross the billion-dollar threshold, blowing up overseas hasn't proven nearly as safe a bet as it used to be. When Iron Man hit theaters worldwide in 2008, 45.5% of its box office revenue came from outside the United States. That percentage went up upon further releases. 59% of profits from the Avengers were from international theaters, and that number went up to 67.3% with Age of Ultron. A staggering 69.3% of Avengers Endgame's gross came from abroad, nearly $2 billion on its own. Since then, much like American audiences, filmgoers in high-value international markets like China and Japan called on the MCU after the Infinity Saga wrapped up. Overseas audiences had a pattern of making up about 55 to 60% of each movie's market share from 2021 to 2023, with a couple exceptions. But that dropped dramatically starting with Deadpool and Wolverine. That film, Captain America Brave New World, and Thunderbolts brought the number down, close to a 50-50 split. The opening weekend of Fantastic Four First Steps had about 46% of its gross come from foreign markets, right back to where Iron Man was all those years ago. Things get even more dramatic if you look at the DC side of things. An even larger percentage of the DC's profits came from across the pond, with both Aquaman movies crossing the 70% mark. Unfortunately for James Gunn's DCU though, only about 42% of the first few weeks of its Superman movie's earnings came from outside the US. If the studios want to remain relevant worldwide, they're going to have to change their approach. If you want to see everything that's wrong with comic book movies today, just take a look at Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. The poorly reviewed CGI spectacle is considered one of the MCU's biggest failures, especially at the box office. That's despite the fact that it earned $467 million during its theatrical run, a number that most smaller independent productions can only dream of. Unfortunately, when your film costs $330 million to make, that number will have you wondering where you went wrong. It doesn't take a business genius to figure out the problem here. These movies cost too dang much to make. The success of Avengers Endgame often overshadows its record-breaking budget of at least $356 million. But as Quantumania proved, a big spend doesn't always guarantee a big return.
No amount of money ever bought a second of time.
It seems that the major studios are already starting to take steps to curb the trend of inflated budgets. Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige admitted as much, saying during a press event, "I think everybody's in that state of mind, at least at Disney. I think it has to get better." Captain America Brave New World and Thunderbolts both have budgets of $180 million, still big, but significantly less over the top than other MCU movies. With the exception of 2024, which was impacted by union strikes in Hollywood, Marvel has released at least 3 movies every year since 2021. 2021 was also the year that WandaVision premiered, bringing streaming television into the MCU's endless stream of content and making the prospect of keeping up with it truly dizzying. It also made quality control much more difficult for the creatives that bring heroes to life, especially writers and visual effects artists. Marvel Studios has become infamous for rushing their upcoming titles into production, often at the expense of quality. It's become well known that Avengers Doomsday started filming without a finished script, leaving its massive roster of actors largely unaware of their characters' motivations. There's also the franchise's well-documented history of rushed and sometimes even unfinished CGI, which has a tendency to yank away viewers' suspension of disbelief. Despite their colossal price tags, Marvel movies have gained a reputation for being sloppy. That'll have to change very soon if the studio wants to stick the landing with the multiverse saga.
I will answer your questions, but you must first transform back to Jennifer.
Why?
You are very expensive.
Then there's DC, which suffered a painful string of failures before they trashed their extended universe entirely. The best DC movie of recent years, both critically and financially, was 2022's The Batman, which was in an entirely new universe of its own. It's clear that audiences care more about a film being good than whether or not it's part of a larger world. Going to the movies used to be something that nearly everyone loved to do, whether it was to see a new release or more just to spend time with family and friends. We'd all go to the cinema on occasion. That changed in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic forced everyone inside and brought the theater experience into our homes in an unprecedented way. As movie theaters started shutting down, studios had to decide whether to postpone their upcoming films or make them available on demand. Marvel ended up doing both. After delaying the premiere of Black Widow 3 times, the film was released simultaneously in reopened cinemas and Disney Plus for an added fee in July 2021. DC found itself in a similar situation with Wonder Woman 1984 and The Suicide Squad, as parent company Warner Bros. Decided to make their new movies available for streaming on HBO Max during their theatrical runs. Even though the COVID lockdown has been over for years, its lasting effects on the film industry still linger. Lots of people realize that they'd rather watch movies at home than leave the house and pay for increasingly expensive tickets. Nothing can replicate the big screen experience, but for many, that doesn't really matter. When comic book movies started gaining popularity at the beginning of the 21st century, It wasn't a challenge to understand their continuity. Everyone understood that the Spider-Man movies existed separately from X-Men and Fantastic Four. On the DC side, Superman Returns released a year after Batman Begins, but no one assumed that it took place in the same reality. As Marvel set about making a massive cinematic universe and buying back its IP from different rights holders like Infinity Stones, tracking continuity became much more difficult. 20th Century Fox's X-Men franchise kept going as the MCU picked up steam. The Fantastic Four were off doing an awful reboot, and Sony started building its own Spider-Man universe that never actually featured Spider-Man. Disney eventually acquired Fox and looped that universe into the MCU via Deadpool and Wolverine, but introducing the concepts of parallel universes and anchor beings to your franchise certainly doesn't make understanding it any easier.
Timekeepers. The sacred timeline. Who actually believes this bunkum?
Many die-hard fans appreciate the constant references to films that they grew up with, but they aren't a big enough demographic to sustain such a massive operation. If Marvel wants to gain back its casual following, it needs to simplify things. And if you're familiar with the comics, you know that Avengers Secret Wars presents the perfect opportunity for a soft reboot. Even though DC just did a reboot of their own, Peacemaker Season 2's multiversal plotline isn't exactly a step in a simplified direction. There's been a lot of talk about superhero fatigue over the past few years, but if they lose their prominence in pop culture, what's going to take their place? If the box office successes of a Minecraft movie and the Super Mario Bros. Movie are any indication, it seems that video games may replace comic books as the go-to source material for blockbuster adaptations. They've also seen plenty of success in the streaming space, from The Last of Us on HBO Max to Fallout on Amazon Prime Video. Superheroes aren't as bright and shiny as they used to be, especially for kids. They've gone from a relatively niche interest to something that your dad is into. Just ask Kevin Feige, whose son wasn't very interested in the MCU until he started playing the video game Marvel Rivals. Feige revealed, "Suddenly he was asking me to tell him more about Hela, tell him more about the Punisher and these other characters, and then he started seeking them out in the shows." Is the key to the comic book box office making movies more like video games? If that means making them more fun and attention-grabbing, absolutely. Marvel Rivals is incredibly easy to jump into and play no matter what the current event is, and cinematic universes should be the same. Fantastic Four and Superman seem to be steps in the right direction, but we'll have to wait until they leave theaters to see just how successful they are.